Hello and welcome back to the What the Falk podcast. We've had 10 days off, but we are back for a one-off special just to have a little look over a thoroughly enjoyable season for Sunderland Association Football Club. We'll be giving reaction to the news, obviously, that Kirill has increased his stake today and Stuart Donald has departed entirely. Looking at the key moments from the season, sort of assessing the key players, hopes for the future, as we basically assess 22-23 in as much depth as we can, and I'm really pleased to be able to do it because it's been a really enjoyable season despite the slightly frustrating end. But first and foremost, I do want to run you through a couple of regular voices to the show. First up, as always, it's Brad Sharp. Brad, are you all right, mate? You doing well?
Yeah, I'm very good, Graham. Thank you. Yeah, I'm just feeling like you said there. Does the end of the season sort of dampen it? No. Just watched the playoff final. It was a little bit frustrating after watching that, seeing the standard that was on show. But yeah, I'm good, mate. Sun's been shining, no rain forecast for quite a while. So yeah.
Yeah, not too bad. I think obviously we're going to get more in depth there, but I do think that 10-day reflections kind of helped. I think it's probably, obviously me and Dave jumped into a reaction show after the Luton game, and it was still quite positive, to be fair, but I think the reflections just helped even more. And I'm actually quite excited to be getting stuck into this, which is probably something you don't always expect at the end of the season with Sunderland, but we've struck gold twice, 2 seasons in a row. But before we go into it, Dave, obviously you're joining us. How are you doing, mate? Are you all right?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Yeah, nice to have a bit of an emotional break from it all, I guess, and the roller coaster that is football life. But yeah, exactly the same as Brad. A little bit frustrated because you think you're the better team than what was on show today. Ultimately, we weren't in the second leg against Luton, which we appreciate that. But yeah, it's good to look back, and we've got plenty of fond memories this season to go at, I think. So yeah, it should be an enjoyable one.
It's funny you mentioned there about having the emotional break, and I was just about to agree with you, but then I remember 6 days ago, obviously people will know I work for a women's football team on the weekend, and we won the title in the 92nd minute at Ibrox, so I have had absolutely no emotional break from it, just a couple of swift, nice drinks last Sunday after a fabulous win. But we're here to talk about Sunderland. But before we do, obviously we are missing Ross. I believe his girlfriend's actually not that far away from giving birth to their first child. So obviously wish them both massive luck. We'll plough on without them, and I'm sure we'll see them in the new season, which either might excite you or might disappoint you. I'm going to leave that to the audience reaction. But Brad, I'm going to come to you first. We planned on doing this for a while, and obviously we're going to go into the sort of looking at the players we signed, the players this season, the best moments of the season, the hopes for the future. But then obviously news broke this morning that Kirill and Satori have both increased their stake. Essentially what it means is that Stuart Donald is completely gone. I think that's probably good news, to be honest, without going too in depth on it. Well, I'm saying probably it is good news. But what are your thoughts on, obviously, the situation? Because Satori then increases his stake, and I know he's not always been flavour of the month with everyone else.
Yeah, it is good news to get started on the summer. I think it follows on from Speakman's interview yesterday, which was really good. If you haven't heard it, have a listen. That they are starting to plan early. He said basically playoffs won't be good enough next year. We want to be automatic. So that means I think they're looking at maybe putting a little bit more money in, a bit more class, a bit more quality. Stuart Donald hasn't got the money to do that. It does prove what we all assumed. He was hanging on, hoping we got promoted this season to make an extra couple of £1 million. That's all it was. So if any positive can be that we didn't go up, was the chancer has completely gone and followed his mate with the red salmon pants out the door. But yeah, it is good. It's good to get it early before the window opens, because it's sort of, we now know that it's just the two of them that are putting the money in. So yeah. I'm actually, like I put in the group yesterday, I'm looking forward to the transfer window based on what Speakman was saying. But I'm even more looking forward to it now, knowing that I think Louis Dreyfus and Sartori are going to try and push us forward to that next level.
Really pleased with your man in the pub micro-analysis there, Brad. Those of you who get the joke will find that hopefully quite funny. Yeah, I agree with a lot of it. I think I make no secret of it. I'm not a huge fan of Satori. I'd rather he was completely out of the picture entirely. But sometimes you kind of get rid of everything you want at the same time. And I think that's two of the main people gone now that we wanted away from the club. And based on the season we've just had and Kirill's track record so far, yeah, very, very good news. And I think that ultimately is a lot more positive than negative. But Dave, I'll come to you as well before we go in depth on the season. I'm going to say, how do you feel about the news? But I know you're going to feel positive about it as well. I think almost everyone does. But what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, pure positivity. He got a lot wrong. He suffered the consequences, and just proves that nobody's bigger than the club. He was always gonna go. He can go back to Eastleigh now. I'm sure he's learned a lot of lessons for himself personally as well. I'm sure that'll maybe stand him in good stead. But I understand the business point of view why he took it on. Who knows where we'd have been at had he not have took it on? Really, I'm sure somebody else would have done it. But
we would have had a potentially £20 million still. But there you
go. Well, there is that, of course. He's gone. We'll forget about him. It could have went a lot worse than it did, in terms of we could have done a bury or something like that. So we've come out the other side. Everything's looking rosy. Everything's looking positive. We don't have to mention him anymore. And looking forward to moving on another season.
It would be interesting to see if when you mentioned the payments there, the 20 million, it'd be interesting to see if the rest of that money has been repaid, or that's part of the transaction, part of the deal, that it doesn't have to pay, but he doesn't get any money. It'd be interesting if the club, well, they'll have to show their accounts, won't they, at some point? If he did make the repayments, or was some sort of deal that was made where he doesn't have to, but he goes with no extra money bought out.
As it was, like we said, we're going to reflect on the season, which has been hugely enjoyable, massively enjoyable, to be fair. Like, I think, almost every week, even sort of the big defeats, even the Stoke defeat when we lost 5-1, I thoroughly enjoyed coming on because I was absolutely wrecked. And that's the first time I've done a podcast in that state, and that was fun looking back. But almost every game this season, every month, every weekend's been really enjoyable, and it definitely feels like there's sort of more of a Sunderland back there. And I said the first thing we were going to discuss was to rate our season out of 10. I'll go first, and I'll hand it over to Brad. But I kind of hummed and hawed on this because 10's obviously you win the league, you don't lose a game, and you're back in the Premier League, and every signing's worked out. It hasn't quite been like that, but it hasn't been that far off. I think I said at the start of the season, if we finish 15th, I'd snap your hands off for it. I just wanted a season of relative consolidation, and sort of, I think pretty early on, we all realised that we were far better than just consolidation. And then we got the injuries, and then we had the managers leaving. Then you had more injuries, then even more injuries. And then you think you're completely out the picture. And then you get in sixth in the playoffs without a centre forward and without your two centre halves. And you just think, looking at that, the adversity that we've come up against throughout the season it's outstanding how we've responded. I think, if there's anything I could maybe be frustrated about, I like to have balance, would be, could we have gone one better if we'd maybe, signed another striker or done something different? Like, could we have maybe got further on if we'd had another version of Ross Stewart in that Luton game? If we'd had, but I think ultimately the amount of injuries we had. I mean, we spoke off air, Brad, before. I think Dan Ballard and a Danny Bart at centre half, and maybe a Ross Stewart up front in that second Luton game, and things may have been very, very different. I don't think anyone could have anticipated Alex Neil even after 4 games. And then literally everyone getting injured. I mean, Embleton, Ross Stewart, Corey Evans, Dan Ballard, Danny Bart, Lyndon Gooch, Dennis Serkin. The list goes on. Like, we missed players for a long period of time. And I'm missing Adji out of that as well. The amount of injuries we had, was just crazy. The fact that we finished 6th with it, and we were basically only bettered by 1 goal by the team who has gone up and is going to be a Premier League team next season, I think is just massive to where Sunderland are as a football club at the moment. And after, when we started this podcast, it was behind closed doors in games, and COVID was happening, and we were in League One, and things were absolutely rubbish, and we had Josh Gowan in midfield, and players that really couldn't manage the magnitude of this football club, and from the likes of sort of Carl Winchester, who really got hold of the club, understood the club, and Ross Stewart and whatnot last season, getting us promoted to this season where, that spirit and continuation of that spirit has came into this season and faced that adversity sort of head on, mixed with the absolute quality that we've got in the likes of Patrick Roberts, Jack Clark, and obviously Diallo there last season, and there's other players that I haven't mentioned. I think it's been a fantastic season, and I think the biggest compliment I can give them is the response of the players and the staff to all of that adversity they've had is an indication of the people that we've got within the club, both on and off the pitch. They've stood up and they've been counted to everything, and not only have they stood up and been counted, they've achieved under it. And I've never been, I've a few times sort of wondered about Speakman and stuff like that, and I just want to go back to what you said before, Brad, about his interview, and he said, like, you can tell, the measure of a person or a team by how they respond to adversity. And he said, this team hasn't just responded, they've achieved. And I absolutely 100% agree with him. And I think it's something as a football club, 8 out of 10, I feel like I should be a bit higher because it's been phenomenal. And I can't wait for the lads to get back and see what we do moving forward. Football club feels alive again, and that's the biggest compliment I can give everyone at the club. Thanks for a great season. Hope it continues. But Brad, I'll stop waffling, mate, because I've just talked a lot. What do you give the club out of 10 this season, and what were your thoughts on the season as a whole?
Echo everything you said, really. It's just been, I think we've said it week in, week out, bar maybe 4 games this season. It's been an absolute joy to watch. Absolutely, like, there's been times where we've been turned up, you see the team sheet and you think, oh, in the previous years, it would have been a justified thought and it probably would have went wrong. But the lads just kept going. There's been times when we had a bunch of young ones in and we were getting beat, but they didn't let the heads drop. And I think that worked to our favour sometimes because they didn't panic. They just kept going. It's just been. How old was I when Peter Reid? Them years I was around 7 to 9 year old through them great times. So I've got a memory of it. But in my memory of being growing up, going to games, this has been the best season, best football that I've seen Sunderland play. So for me, for a rating of the season, it's got to be a 9. I mean, the only way it can be a 10 is, like you said, if we got promoted when it was champions or went up through the playoffs. But we were very close and we got there somehow. I mean, I called it at the start of the season. I've just got to put that back in there. But yeah, 9 out of 10. It could have easily been maybe a 9.5. It's just been absolutely fantastic. And that's the only thing I'm disappointed about is the season's finished, because I just love going to games every single week. I love watching us. I love the brand of football. Speaks volumes when Unai Emery this week was doing his press conference for the Brighton game tomorrow. 2 very good teams, Villa and Brighton, play very good football. And Emery touched on watching Sunderland this season and how good they were. He says, like, the brand of football in different leagues, but then he said you only have to look in the Championship, and he quoted us and Burnley. And that's a massive compliment considering Burnley ripped this league to bits. So it's been noticed everywhere, and it's not just us being a bit biased. It's just been fantastic. Every pundit you listen to always compliment that. It's just when we score a great goal, it's not just a one-off. Sunderland do this week in, week out. And it's something we've become accustomed to, so I'm very excited to see how we go next season. But from the season gone, 9 out of 10, couldn't complain about pretty much anything.
Yeah, same. We've had certain things where we've gone, the striker situation, obviously we discussed quite a bit and stuff like that, but everything that was a worry in the end worked out being relatively all right in many ways. I mean, I know we didn't beat Luton and that hurt and yada yada, but hey, crikey, we had Lynn and Gucci centre off as well, so I don't know how much a striker would have fixed that issue. But Dave, I know you're going to be positive as well about it, because I know you've enjoyed it as much as me and Brad, but I will give you a say as well. What's your mark out of 10 and why?
Just to be different, because we all know I love it, I'll go 8.5. Nah, come on. It's what can you say? It's probably boring for people. Well, probably boring for people listening because we're just all season we've done it. And even the mini meltdowns that we've had, apart from the one infamous quote about trying Luke 09 up top because we were fucked. Other than that, I don't think we've had much of a wobble this year from us reviewing games. And I think to echo the bit that you said about the staff and the players and the squad, if you look at it, every single time there's been adversity, someone steps up and someone does something. They don't just make up the numbers; they make themselves counted. It's magic. I mean, Benetti away at Watford. There's so many of them. Gelhardt, okay, we haven't, me and you especially, haven't massively overly enjoyed watching him too much, but we can still appreciate what he did massively. And I think if you look at his loan, what would you maybe give it a 6.5 out of 10 for the time that he was here? Probably could easily be a 7 just for his workman-like performances. It's not his fault that he's small, you know. But he did a job, came in, and he bought into the ethos that we seem to have. Mowbray seems to extend that massively. So we'll go 8.5. I think Brad's right. 4 times this season, maybe we haven't turned up. We can definitely say Stoke. I think Luton second leg, unfortunately, and I know they've done a job on us. The Stoke game, we weren't at the races, but Luton were very effective in what they did to us, and fair play to them, and well done for getting promoted. They'll have a great year themselves. It does. I've had that 10 days of reaction, and to look back on it, and yes, I'm not that bitterly disappointed that it's kind of missed out on a massive opportunity to get promoted, because I think we're better than what was in there. Just failed on the day, unfortunately, and because of those massive injuries. But I think all anyone wanted, probably the people who took over the club and stuff like that, was for us to be proud again as a club, as a city, of the people representing us. I think I'd struggle to find many people who could say that we're not proud of what's going on out there at the minute. And everyone's excited. Brad's alluded to it, how he's listened to the podcast about Speakman saying automatic promotion. That will be an expectation within the fan base next season. So the first 12 games are going to be massively interesting. But we've got about 10 wonder kids to sign before then. So we've got to be really excited to see who comes in from. I'm sure we're probably looking at like the Azerbaijani Ronaldinho or something like that. Definitely on his way in. Can't wait for it.
I think you touched before about players coming in, stepping up as well. I think one game that sticks out in my mind, and I'm not going to go too in depth about the players, because obviously the next question is our top 3 players, and we're going from 3 to 1. You look at the Birmingham game on the Friday night where Diallo scored and Simsy scored. And I think that day we were absolutely knackered for injuries. Like, if you remember our defence that day, I'm sure it was Danny Bart, Luke 09 at centre-half. Your left back was Niall Huggins, who hadn't played for about 18 months. And then at the time, your right back was Trey Hume, someone who hadn't barely played that season. And when he came in the season prior, he looked a bit shaky, like the Rotherham game at home in League One just before the playoffs and stuff like that. I think when you look at the way they came in and they stepped up, that defence, to be fair, I know Huggins has not been fit really, but that ended up being our defence for most of the end of the season because it was so good from there moving forward. And even though, like I said, Diallo, I know obviously we'll go in more in depth on Diallo and stuff like that, but Diallo came in not at the start of the season. He came in after Mowbray taking over. I think he was introduced against Rotherham. And then Roberts didn't start the season in the team. Everyone that's came in has just really stepped up. And I think going on to this next question is actually really difficult. Normally, if you're trying to pick your favourite 3 players or the best 3 players or players you want to give, pardon me, I've got a white cough today. You want to give you pick the three players that you want to give sort of a bit of love to, or say had a good season. You can normally just sort of pick them, and it's normally relatively easy. Like even last season, it was like, well, Ross Stewart, and then you had a few more players. And last season was a very good season that ended very, very well. But this season, it's like I feel like every week I've got a different favorite player. Every time I watch someone, I'm like, oh, I love Diallo. Oh, I love Patrick Roberts. Oh, Jack Clark's amazing. So narrowing down these three was actually really difficult, to the point where I had to have a tie in my number 3 place. So I'll go first, and I'll come to Brad for his number 3, and then you as well, Dave. But my number 3 is a tie because I couldn't split them apart. I genuinely couldn't split them apart for their performances this season. I don't think it's going to shock anyone that one of them's Amad Diallo. Crazily unlucky not to be number 1 because of the moments he's had this season, the quality he's shown on the pitch. And I think he's probably the best loan player I've had in my lifetime. One absolutely terrific player, just brilliant throughout the whole season. We'll get into his moments, but I really felt like he came here, he's found a home. You could quite clearly see it's hurting him to leave, even though I think we all agree we kind of understand why. And I just think he's been fabulous. I thought he would be a good signing when we brought him in. I know he didn't have the best season last season at Rangers, but the times I'd watched him, you could see there was a bit of quality there. And when he came here, he just was even better than what I expected. But alongside him is someone who I honestly didn't think would make the grade for a long, long time, and thought maybe that's the duffer we've signed. You know, that's the Leon Diaku of last January, as it was. But his personality, his commitment, he loves a tackle. I think that massively endears him to almost every Sunderland fan in the fan base. But he's also a really good player. He's fitted in a few different positions this season across the back. He's workmanlike. He's got to get him forward. He can put a good ball in. He's popped it with a couple of important goals, one in the playoffs. But for me, Trey Hume has been outstanding. For me, I think, my favourite player of all time when I was a kid was Chris Macon. And I don't know why, but I think looking back, I just like that he worked hard. I knew he was going to give me a 7 out of 10 every week. And I knew that if he was going to get beaten, it wasn't going to be because of effort. And I feel like Trey's exactly like that. And I get the feeling he's going to be one of my favourite players come season end. And I'm absolutely devastated I can't put Patrick Robertson because obviously he's unbelievable. But unfortunately, he narrowly misses out. But in my number 3 spot is 2. I've picked Diallo and Trey Hume because I literally can't split them apart. But my number 2 and my number 1 are separate entities. But Brad, I'll ask for your number 3. Where we going?
I'm exactly the same. I can't split between 2. But one of my ones in the top 2 might be a bit controversial. But yeah, so in tied for me in 3rd, and this probably is controversial, it would be Danny Bart. Now he's unlucky to be further up for me because I thought he was absolutely exceptional all season. Won the Fans Player of the Year. But I just think the people I've picked above him for different reasons have maybe impressed me a little bit more. But that's not taking anything away from Danny Barr because I could pick 8 that could all fight for first. So, and it's great to have that dilemma. And third, and my joint 3rd is another one which is probably a little bit controversial as well, because he probably should be higher up because of his numbers. I mean, how many 24 goals and assists or goal contributions this season would be Jack Clark? And the only reason I haven't put him higher is I'm probably one of the very few fans. It's because of how good a player he is. When he's having an off game, I get so frustrated with him. And there's been a few times this season when he's I sit in the south stand when we're attacking our way, and he's coming down the left hand side, the side I sit at. And sometimes I'm just like, put the ball in, and he run out of play, and I just get so angry. Or he gives away the silly little fouls when he doesn't need to. But that's the negatives on him. What he's produced numbers wise for such a young lad, someone who's probably been a little bit out of confidence after being passed from pillar to post over the last couple of seasons after his big money move. That's a statement season for him to come back and put in numbers like that. Because God, if he wasn't frustrating, what would his numbers be like? If he was just a consistent player of how good he is, he wouldn't be with us. So both of them are very unlucky not to be higher up in mine, but Danny Bart and Jack Clark, just the class. They've had a class season, but my 2, in my opinion, have had a better one.
I'm going to reiterate that I don't think Jack Clark's frustrating at all. I absolutely love him. Dave, you can have your number 3.
This is the it's the worst game ever because like I don't know how I can fit so few people when I've had such a great season of watching them. So where we got you two have had two, so I'm having two. Massive injuries, but he give us one of the best and a bit of a personal moment for me. Give us one of the best feelings. I took my daughter to our first game down at West Brom, and I think he's been brilliant. And you wouldn't expect your left back, your left centre back, to pop up with 2 goals against a very, very huge big team. So I'm almost not doing this based on quality. I'm doing it based on slight favoritism of who's given me great moments this season. So in tied third for me would definitely be Dennis Serkin. Yeah, I could go anywhere with this. But I just think he's brilliant. It's nice, isn't it? Isn't it weird how as football fans, a lot of us get told that we haven't got a clue or whatever. And remember when the Spurs fans were all over Twitter? Can't believe we're getting rid of him. There's a player in there somewhere. Now, I'm not saying for a second that he would be anywhere close to Tottenham's first team, although saying that, he might be.
I think he would.
But it looks...
I think probably fit Dennis Serkin does.
Yeah, it's crazy to think how we get these reactions. Adji was very, very, very similar. West Ham, and they were like, "Yeah, we've lost a player there." So Dennis Serkin's in there. And the other one, and this is probably controversial because he could possibly be higher, but I wrote him off. He's come back. He can play anywhere. He can smile. He can do whatever he wants. My tied number 3 would be Luke.
Oh, I expected Leon Diaco there. I thought it was going to be Diaco. I thought Diaco was coming out.
Oh, I was tempted. No, he was number 5, but we didn't drop that low. So, no, it's again, he just epitomizes what Sunderland's about, what playing for Sunderland's about. People can get bored of the narrative, but it's true. He's a bit of a cult hero. Brad's given us some grief about Barley Mumba Championship footballer next year. Just saying, unbelievable. Plymouth fans loved him. So, and he was number 6, Brad. Anyway,
yeah, you have to. For the record, if anyone's thinking why is Barley Mumba randomly came up, you have to know or have listened to the episode to understand. And if you haven't, I don't know which episode it was, so it's just tough. I can't send you back. It was sometime last season. I can't remember when, but
last season's review show where we picked our best League 1 11.
Oh yes, it was. And you picked Barley Mumba, right?
Oh, as if that was the worst part. I'm sure because I was going last all the time. I'm sure we ended up with Glenn bloody Louvens in there, didn't I?
Yeah, you did.
So Barley Mumba was not the worst of that team, believe it or not.
Deary me. We're going to go for a break soon. But before we do, I'll choose my number 2, and then obviously you can come back when we're going to be talking about our best moments of the season, the best goal of the season, and then sort of digging into what we think could happen next season. And it's going to be a bit of a longer show than usual. I'll put a bit of hold music in between with the magic of editing on Premiere Pro, and then we'll be back. But as it is, we won't have the hold music. We'll just wait, and then I'll come back. I'm sure you know what I mean. But my number 2 has been mentioned already. Probably slightly unlucky not to be number 1. Danny Bart, just outstanding, and I think he's the poster boy for why we could probably do with a slight little bit more experience heading into next season because of how much he's led that team through it. And I don't want to touch on that Luton game, but there was parts of me that was like, oh, if you just had a Danny Bart to lead that back line in that second leg, maybe we might have got to extra time at least. But he's been that good, and he's led a very young team and a very young defence and a central midfielder at centre half through a season with his experience, his nous, his strength, his ability. And I think he's a great centre half, and he's one of the best free transfer signings we've made in ages. And long may Danny Bart's reign at centre half continue. But we're going to jump into a wee break, and then we'll come back with Brad, Dave's number 2, my number 1, and Brad's number 1, and Dave's number 1, a few of our favourite moments of the season. And then we'll look at sort of ahead of next season and what we can hope and expect. And I'm sure it's going to be just as positive as this one. So thanks for joining me and joining us. And we'll see you in a couple of seconds. Welcome back to part 2. Obviously, hopefully you enjoyed part 1. I'm guessing if you're here, you have enjoyed part 1. If you haven't, I'm going to be asking questions, but nonetheless, we're all going to crack on. If you want to be reminded of what I said 5 seconds ago or 10 seconds ago, I chose, of course, number 3 as Amad Diallo and Trey Hume. My number 2 was Danny Bart. Brad, you chose Jack Clark and Danny Bart as your number 3. Dave, you then chose Barley Mumba and Glenn Louvens as your number 3. But Brad, it's time for your number 2. And when I say time for your number 2, I don't mean a toilet break.
No, I've just had my toilet break with everyone else. So yeah, my number 2 has already been mentioned. It was a player where a lot of people thought, could he step up? A lot of people still don't rate him, I don't think. Which is crazy. But the reason I put him number 2 instead of Danny Bart is because when Bart got injured, he's basically led the back line as a centre midfielder, playing centre half. He is a centre half now, no doubt about it. But I think Luke O'Nien this season has probably been his best season for Sunderland. Because yes, he's probably played better when he was at right back, and he's had some better moments over the years, but that was relative to League One. The way he's stepped up and not only filled in alongside Danny Bart when Ballard was out, and I think the flip side, I think Danny Bart went off against Hull and was missing a couple of games when Ballard was just coming back. He filled in there. The fact that he was our most experienced centre-half somehow, and he marshalled that back line, and I think that, like, I know he gave the penalty away against West Brom, but I thought he was absolutely outstanding that game. How he managed to just keep the young lads and Gooch. He just, no matter what people keep saying he's limited on his ability, he finds a way to overcome any sort of adversity thrown his way. And I don't think I've ever seen anyone probably as hard working as Luke. His little video that he done, openly said his debut, he was honking. Took him ages to get back in the side. But it's just because you can tell when he makes a mistake, he does something wrong, something's not quite there. He goes away and he works harder than anyone else. And I think that's just the epitome of what type of player I've always loved to see playing for Sunderland. Just someone who will work their nuts off and will never, ever give up no matter what people think. So this season, I think Luke O'Nien has just been absolutely exceptional. Again, probably not because of his technical ability, but just for his all-round leadership and just never give up. And I mean, he's given us some unbelievably funny moments this season as well. Necking on with someone at Norwich, getting a piggyback at the Stadium of Light, lifting his baby up to the crowd like it was the League One trophy last season, giving Mowbray his baby so he can go and give someone else his shirt in the crowd. There's little bits like that as well. It's just something that you remember. But yeah, Luke O'Nien for me this season has just been brilliant.
Yeah, we're a very pro Luke O'Nien podcast. I don't know if that knocks us down the list of Sunderland podcasts. I don't know. I don't know if it increases our chances of being one of the better Sunderland podcasts, but we're still happy with our 5th place. Dave, who's your number 2?
Somebody you've already mentioned, rather. And I think he is going to turn into a top class footballer. And probably go on to bigger and better things with us, unless, of course, we do a Gary Neville and qualify for the Champions League very soon, because we all want to see that. So for me, it's Trey Hume. I just think he's phenomenal. I think he's got a bit of everything. He's got the right attitude. I think he's one thing I will say with the whole squad: very, very, very level-headed guys. Nobody's above themselves. Everybody knows their job. So yeah, I just think he's a wonderful footballer. I think it's nice to see a right back who's a little bit taller than average, wins things in the air. So it means they haven't got a weakness when certain teams come up against you and go, just put it on the fullback. Let's not try and play football. He loves a challenge. Yeah, big fan. And also, I think he's got, in abundance, technical ability. I think he's an absolutely brilliant footballer. And I'm interested to see how he gets on with the rest of his career, to be fair. Hopefully a long time with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I move on to my number one, what did he mean if we do with Gary Neville?
He was on, was it Gary Neville? Was it? I'm sure it was, wasn't it? Last week, he said that he'd love to see, I can't remember what he was on, but he'd love to see a team like Sunderland qualifying for the Champions League.
He was on Monday Night Football, and he said he was just talking about Newcastle that we just got to the Premier League, to the Champions League. Sorry for swearing. And he said Dave Jones was on there, and he said, like your team, Dave, Sunderland, I'd love to see them in the Premier League, challenging for titles, challenging for the Champions League. Because it was all about teams with big fan bases or a brand of football, but they don't have the money, so they'll always be a little bit further down. That's what you were saying.
I had no idea he even said that. I don't listen to Gary Neville at the best of times, to be honest. So, but fair play. Cheers, Gary. I prefer you to your brother. I don't know if that's a compliment or not. And as the song goes, if the Nevilles can play for England, no, I can't. My number one's been mentioned, and I think people probably know I'm going to go with this. I think I'd give him. I think in our half-season review when the World Cup was on, I give him Player of the Year so far, or Player of the Season so far, and I haven't changed from it. And I'm probably completely different to what Brad was saying before regarding him. It's Jack Clark is my number one. I just think his numbers are like they're ridiculous. Like his numbers are so good, and I think I'm probably the opposite. Like I know some fans get frustrated by like the way that he is, but he doesn't for me. I actually get excited every time he gets the ball, and I think the times when things don't come off, that's just because he's so brave in doing it, and he's so confident in his own ability. And it's been a long while since I've seen a young lad, and he's 22, have a bit of like cocky arrogance that as a winger, like I'm going to beat you, I'm going to get around you, and if you are going to get the ball off me, you're going to have to foul us, and I'm good enough to kind of draw the foul and win the free kick. He's done that a few times this season, but I think there's so many players I could have picked. Like, I absolutely love Patrick Roberts. I actually prefer watching Patrick Roberts play football in terms of wingers, but I just think Clark, he's got the numbers. He's someone I've really bought into as a footballer. I'm really hoping no one comes in with money for him, because if we're falling in love with Diallo and all that kind of stuff, like I've really fallen in love with Jack Clark. He really excites me. I've got a lot of time for him. And I think he's absolutely pivotal to anything we do moving forward. And for me, his numbers don't lie. And for the fact that he didn't even start the playoff final last season, and actually Elliot Embleton did, for him to come in and have the season he's had, and it started right from the off with that header against Coventry. I just think he's been tremendous. I love the fact that even when he's had games when he did have a honking game at Middlesbrough away, but he never stopped trying to get the ball. He never stopped saying, give it to us. Absolutely nothing came off for him that night, but he kept going, and I've got so much time for his character. I love that video when he says, what do you like doing, Jack? And he goes, playing for Sunderland. And I'm just like, that's just what I want. And for me, Jack Clark is probably my standout star of the season. I think, just to kind of be fair to Brad before, he didn't frustrate you as much as it might have sounded. You've put him in your top three, so you obviously quite like him as well. But for me, he's been my number one. I absolutely love watching him, and I'm really hoping that I can continue to do so next season. And I am a little bit worried that his numbers are going to get noticed and there might be a bid. And unfortunately, I'm aware of the model. But prove us wrong, Jack. Prove us wrong, Christian. Prove us wrong, Kirill, and say no to any big bids, because I think he's absolutely class. Brad, who's your number one?
Yeah, number one. I mean, just before I mention that, you both mentioned Trey Hume. If we were doing Young Player of the Year, he was mine. That's who I voted for on the fans one anyway, because I agree with both what you said. But my Player of the Year, I don't think we've went to podcast without actually mentioning his name since it was unveiled at the Stage My Light alongside 3 other guys. I've said, and you've said, you've tried to say it's all relative because we're Championship, we've been in the Premier League. But for me, he is the most technically gifted footballer I've ever seen play for Sunderland. And that's Amad Diallo. He's probably scored 5 goals this season, 6 goals that are goal of the season contenders, not just for us, but probably for all of football in England. And I think you touched on the Birmingham game, and I don't think I appreciated really at the time of how good a footballer he was, how he kept the ball to assist Sims. That was just frightening. I watched the video back the other day of all the goals this season. When you watch that back, it's just wow.
His strength in that moment to keep hold of the ball. And I remember at the start of the season, some people said, "Oh, he's luxury and he doesn't track back, he doesn't work so hard. Yeah, he looks nice on the ball." I tell you what, take out his goals and how brilliant he's been with Diallo. The kid works his absolute bollocks off as well. He tracks back, he tackles, he uses his strength, and it's half the reason he's created so many goals and scored so many this season.
That's what I'm saying. Like, another reason I would pick him is not just his on the ball stuff, his off the ball stuff. My only worry now is with him going back to Manchester United, they're going to realise pre-season that he needs Patrick Roberts to play alongside him. So that they're going to come in and just chuck 60, 70 million at Patrick Roberts, and then they've got themselves a good player there.
They're not going to get Patrick that cheap, mate. I'm not going to, not for that cheap.
But yeah, this season, him and Roberts, again, I can't believe I haven't included Roberts in this top 3. But him and Roberts together, I've always used the same sort of analogy. It's like when you were back at school and the 2 best year 11s in the school went on the AstroTurf at dinner time, and there was a bunch of year 7s trying to chase and get the ball off them. And no matter what they'd done, no matter how many people or little young'uns are trying to chase after them, they just couldn't get the ball back. And that was how many goals did we score from them? They were just linking up like that. It was just brilliant. Look, we've talked about him weekly, so I can't not put him number 1.
Yeah, I think for me, probably the most technically gifted player we've had since Sessegnon, and I don't mean this in a bad way, Sess, but Sess often had lead in his boots and couldn't really shoot. The once or twice he did, it was quite decent. Diallo's got it all, and I honestly think he's going right at the top. I've kind of come to peace with the fact that he's probably a Champions League player in time. If he's not, I'll be surprised. I'll openly admit that, and maybe I'm over-egging him here, but I just honestly thought he was that good. I think the kid's a genuine talent, one of the best I've seen in ages, and God, Man United are lucky to have him. Dave, I'm quite interested to see who your number 1's going to be based on previous choices in previous years. Where we're going?
Because you've given me enough love, I can't believe I'm missing Amad out of my top 3. But you've already given me enough of a loving. I echo every single sentiment that you've both said. I think that's sick. As much Brad is just messaging that I'm going to pick Ross Stewart. I mean, we all know that I'd love to do that, but 12 games is...
Based on Roscoe's numbers, realistically, you can't even be mad at Roscoe because, like, obviously the injuries aren't his fault, and he scored about almost a goal a game in the games he's been in.
He had our 3rd most goal contributions throughout the whole season, only bettered by Amad and Jack Clark.
Love him. Absolutely love Ross Stewart. He's still the main man for me, 100%.
Can't wait for him to get back. And as much as I'd love to pick Roscoe, the reason that I haven't put the likes of Danny Bart in my top 3, which is a little bit hypocritical because I picked Cirque and he's been injured a long time. But the injuries and stuff have just curtailed their seasons a little bit too much. So for me, you've already mentioned him and I've absolutely loved him. I'm loving the little videos from the guys at Sunderland where they're asking the question of the week. And that's one thing. I'll give a special mention to Jack Clark and Try Hume. The fact that I love the last question where it's like, what's been your favourite part of the season? And they've gone, we haven't had Monday yet. And it's that attitude, it's that positive belief that just one of my favourite moments of the season. I watched that video back and back, and I go, I'm not quite sure how we've made the playoffs because we shouldn't have had a right to, in terms of Millwall absolutely chucking it away at home. But my number one, I've watched him since he was 17-year-old, and I've followed him and thought he was brilliant. He's done it in the Champions League. He was unlucky that he didn't get a run at City. But I think Patrick Roberts is just an absolute wonderful, wonderful footballer. I love watching him. I just, him and Ahmad, Ahmad especially, the first leg against Luton, that second half, it's not a comparison, but he walked through that second half against Luton. He just strolled about. And I have not seen a footballer do that since its levels, of course. But Zidane is probably my favourite footballer of all time because I don't think he ever sprinted. He just jogged. Well, he'll be up there by the time he retires. But he just used to stroll through games. So I'm giving a bit of an Ahmad love in here, but it's all about Patrick Roberts. I absolutely love watching the bloke every week. And I think Mowbray has said a few times this season, how unlucky is he? Because he is a wonderful, wonderful footballer. His quality is absolutely immeasurable, but he can't get him in the team sometimes. And I just love watching him. So Patrick Roberts for me.
Yeah, I can't disagree with Patrick. I think he's probably my favourite player to watch. Honestly, there's so many players. Like Pato has been outstanding this season. Like Pato deserves huge credit. I think Dan Ballard's been incredibly unlucky to have two big injuries because when I've watched him, I see a 20, 25 million defender there, and that's without, that he hadn't even had a full season yet. But anyway, we're waxing lyrical. We're being brilliant. That's kind of what we're saying. My cat's having a meow in the background, so he's even happy about it all. Going to go through moment of the season. It's really hard to narrow this down, because there's been so many good ones. But I'm going to ask you for a quick, fast one because we've only got about 15 minutes left. I'll go with mine first, and it might be the same as everyone else's. And if it is, that's fine. And I'll give a few sort of bullet point reasons behind it. Preston away. There's been some amazing days. Luton at home in the playoffs, Blackburn at home, Boxing Day, Wigan away. But for me, the day at Preston, the club felt together. Had a little bit of luck on our side, but that second half when we knew Millwall were 3-1 up, everyone just went, I didn't mind, just go and win the game, do what we can do, do what we can do and let's have a good day. We'll still have a pint after it, it'll be fine. And then when the luck kind of came on our side a little bit on top of that, it was just amazing the way that it all worked out. The club felt together, the fans felt together, and I kind of think I knew we weren't going to win the playoffs, but there was a part of me that was like, no matter what happens here, got my club back a bit, and I know that's cheesy, but it's true. So for me, Preston away. But Brad, yours might be different. It might be the same. I don't know.
I was torn between two. Yeah, go on. I'll go with it. For me, it was Watford away when Bennett scored, and the reason for that was we just chucked 5 young'uns on that not one of us really knew anything about. And we pulled it back against a good Watford side. What we thought was a good Watford side, tough place to go. And it just at that moment, I just thought, you know what, this team's got no fear, and Tony Mowbray is not going to be worried, not going to be afraid to throw these young'uns on and have a go because it worked. I thought Bennett's goal for me was unbelievable. It was just a great moment. I think that might have been actually a bit of a turning point where we've got nice strikers, but we've managed to score 2 goals away from home, salvage a point, and play with a bunch of lads who were doing the GCSEs or their equivalent in France last year, or Costa Rica. I was torn between that and West Brom, because the West Brom game, when we won, I genuinely believed we were going to get promoted. So for an individual moment, I'm torn between them two, but I'll just edge Watford just because of how it came about, and we were forced into them changes, and Mowbray basically had no fear, and it paid off.
Dave, same question to you. You've got one choice. I know it's hard, but go for it.
Very. there's so many moments I wasn't lucky enough to be at Preston, but even watching it, I think I was in Tunisia at that time when I was watching it. So
I just got what you meant there. Were you scouting the next wonder kid? Like,
well, man, honestly, yeah, I should have went with Azerbaijan. Kept
watching it with Wabi Kazri just by your side.
Oh yeah, but it looked immense. It was fantastic. Moment of the season, just shading it is probably Luton at home. It was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. From the minute we went before the game, the club got it right. It was brilliant. It was absolutely magical. So I absolutely loved that. And instant moment, I shouldn't have to, but I've got to give a quick mention because I was at Reading and I haven't been to too many. But that goal, the goal at Reading, especially sitting next to Glenn, I love giving Glenn a little mention, but Glenn's there going, fucking hell, Dave, what's going on? Dave, fucking hell's the worldie. And I'm like, love it, absolutely love it, Glenn. That is what we can do. And yeah, I think that was the moment in the season that I knew that we were in for a good year. So banging.
Still can't get over how much for the listeners not old enough to remember this, Glenn Little, you won't remember him, but for those of you who do remember Glenn Little, who's not Australian despite Dave's accent, he looks like Blakey from On the Buses, and it's still one of the best lookalikes ever. Sorry, Glenn. Completely not Sunderland related, but nonetheless, he does look like Blakey from On the Buses. The next choice we have here is goal of the season. So it's Jack Clark against Reading. Brilliant. We're moving on. And we want to move on to sort of next season. Look, we hummed and hawed about it. Yeah, there was loads of great goals, but Jack Clark's is the best. Dave's mentioned it. We're not going to give anyone a choice. It's Jack Clark's goal against Reading. Shove that right up your arse. AFL Championship people who choose goal of the season because you're idiots for not even considering it for nomination because it is prime Tony Mowbray's Sunderland and it's bloody brilliant. But next season, Brad, obviously with this time in the time we're speaking, we don't know too much about who we're going to sign. The rumours aren't really there. We're just 10 days out of our own season, but we know Michu obviously is not going to stay, which I'll openly admit I'm really disappointed with. I really liked Edouard Michu, but the listeners are going to be surprised here. I have trust in the recruitment model. Yes, I know. I've got to trust it. They've earned the stripes. That they've earned credit and they've got a bit of credit in the bank from me. Well, I think it's got to have a bit of adjustment. Fair enough. If you think Michu doesn't make sense, okay, I'll trust you on it, as disappointed as I am. But aside from that, there's only, obviously, sadly, the man I love more than anyone in the world, Carl Winchester, has gone into the release list. And then Jacob Carney, obviously, third choice goalkeeper. So there's going to be some moves in the transfer window. I think the work will have already gone into that. But looking ahead to next season, there's obviously a few things, Brad. Is there more pressure now? And where do you think we need to strengthen? And what things can we do to ensure that, getting in the playoffs is not an achievement next season? Maybe winning the playoffs or maybe even having to go to the automatics. Because I think there will be a little bit of an expectation on there from both the club, the players, and also the fans.
For me, there's a few areas. I do think we need another Corey Evans mould of a midfielder. My experience, I mean. I know we've got lads like Ekwan that can play there. Dan Neil's done a decent enough job when he's been called upon. But we need someone with experience in there, just in case. For me as well, on the striker department, now it might seem daft, I think we need 3 strikers. And the reason being, we need to plan as if Ross Stewart is not here. He's had 2 big injuries this season. So we need to have... Stewart might come back next year and play every single minute of every game, like he'd done in the League One season, which would be fantastic. But we need to use that as sort of maybe a bonus. We can't rely on the fact, right, he's had 2 injuries, he's had a good pre-season. Let's hope that he'll be fine for next year. If we plan with maybe a young up-and-coming striker in the sort of mould of Ross Stewart, look, hey, if we can go and get Ellis Sims back, depending on what happens in the Premier League tomorrow, if Everton stay up, I wouldn't be surprised if we go and get Ellis Sims and make him our first signing. Because I will reiterate, they have treated him
absolutely appallingly since he's gone back. I know he scored against Chelsea away, but that's just a bog standard mid-table Premiership team, isn't it?
Yes.
So for me, we need 3 strikers, and that's key. And probably another decent centre half, because we're being left very short. I mean, I still think it's crazy that we allowed Bailey White to go on loan because we brought in Joe Anderson, and we had no centre halves. Anderson still couldn't play, so what was the point in sending Bailey White out? That was a bit of a strange one for me. And it might sound daft because Pato's played every minute this season, but again, he's a young lad. Could he suffer from burnout? He's not going to have a long break as he's being called up for the provisional Euros squad for England. I'd probably look at an experienced goalkeeper to come in as well. Again, like we said last year, to push him. I know Bass is probably an all right lad. I haven't seen too much of him. I'd probably look to get someone in and get shot of Bass. Someone who's we're going to be confident in, could replace Anthony Patterson if Patterson does have a little bit of a dip. But apart from that, the squad we've had this season with the players that are going to be coming back from injury, they can stay fit just with 1 or 2. Well, I say 1 or 2. I've just said 3 strikers. So maybe 6 good additions and 2 experienced additions in that 6. I think we'll be in good stead.
Yeah, I would like to see us deviate from the model slightly. I would like us to stick with it in the main, but I think, how much we missed Corey Evans, how important Danny Bart was this season, and even Pritchard towards the end when moments really mattered, probably show you that you do need a little bit, at least in the squad. I would like to keep all the players we have here as well. That's a big thing. I think there'll be some bids coming in. You touched on Pato before. My big worry with Pato and Jack Clark is that, we're not the only club with a model that looks at young players to try and build them up, and we'll be, potentially, you could look at us as players that you can pick up and produce and make better.
Yeah. I mean, what I did say to you off air as well, I should have touched on for next season, is when we came up last year, we were looking forward to our front 4, and I think a lot of people were fearing what we could do with Jack Clark, Patrick Roberts, Alex Pritchard and Ross Stewart. And I think if Ross Stewart's in the side, we get the best out of Alex Pritchard, because he's not the one leading the press. Stewart does that, and Alex is the next line behind that. So to see the best out of Pritchard, which, look, he hasn't had a bad season. I would say he's had a strong 7 out of 10 this season, which isn't that bad. I still think there's something there from Pritchard, and to maybe go up another level if he's got Ross Stewart in front of him, because them 2 were brilliant together last season. Well, the season before last, because now this season was last season. Yeah, I'm waffling. But you've got to think we were very excited to see that front 4. We've just been very lucky and blessed that Ahmad was basically ready-made to come in and change the way that we play. But you might see us revert back to putting Ross Stewart up there and Pritchard in behind him, because that worked. That was a dream to watch sometimes, that mind.
I think on top of that as well, there's also one thing we probably should remember is that as good as the whole squad's been this season, I think Jewison Benetti was starting to show signs of maybe not being just completely raw. I thought he played well against Fulham when he came on, and there's certainly something about him. Abdullah Bar, I think, has got a big season coming ahead of him, and I think we were just starting to see what Pierre Ekwa can produce. So the good thing about that is, as well as on top of what we've already got, there is certain young players there that are starting to show exactly what they've got. So there's plenty to be positive within the squad. I think if you add a good few additions to the squad, I think Burnley have to be a team that you look to aspire to be. I'm not saying let's go win the league with 100 odd points, but they brought in some good young hungry players and mixed it with the likes of experience like Josh Brownhill, and I think that is just a perfect combination. And fingers crossed we can go on and do quite well. But Dave, I'm going to leave you with sort of the last question. What should be the aim next season? Are we aiming too high? Are we kind of delirious from a good season, or is automatic promotion with the right sort of recruitment, staying a bit more free from injury and building on what we've done this season? Is it realistic, or is it just a case of, do you think, getting the playoffs and see if we can then win it a little bit like Luton have this season?
I think everything's quite well balanced from a club nowadays. So I think the minimum will be behind closed doors will be top six. I think that's what they'll aim for. I think we as fans, considering we've done it with so many injuries this season and the style of football that we're playing, I think we're going to expect that as well. So yeah, a couple of improvements. I personally think Pritchard will be off in the summer. I don't know why. It's just a feeling I've got. And I just wonder if the club might look at Gelhardt as a replacement for him, which would be an interesting one. And I think I found our next loan player who I'd love to fall in love with. And I wonder if we might have a little cheeky go at someone like Cole Palmer. That'd be interesting. But yeah, I think the one thing I'd want to stick with is keeping everybody at the club, or certainly 90% of them. I think they've all got a great dynamic. I think they're all of similar ages, and a couple of little experience tweaks here and there. I think they'd be fantastic. So for me, it's top six. Well, let's put the predictions out at the end of the season. Top six with a little flirt of top two. That's next season's prediction.
I think you're right in what you say. I have a feeling we'll be sniffing around the likes of someone like Charlie Patino as well. I think we're pretty stacked in midfield, and I'd like a bit more experience in there, but I think you can't turn down someone who's going to be available pretty cheap. But it'll be really interesting to sort of see what players do come in. I mean, Diallo last season was like, it felt big at the time. It was even better than I ever thought it was. And with the names like Cole Palmer and players like that, teams are going to look at us now and go, yeah, they can develop players and we can bring them back to our club and go on. And that is how the loan market works. Unfortunately for the club, when you lose a Diallo, it's disappointing, but I'd rather have a player here for a season that contributes the way he does, and clubs trusting that we can develop these players, and then we sort of move on. But lads, it's been great to chat and sort of assess the season. Much like last season, obviously last season was a bit more delirious and a bit more relief, but this would just be nice to sit down and sort of assess it. I don't really know what we plan to do over the summer. People have been incredibly nice all season and very much as nice when the season's ended. So I'm sure we'll be doing something for you because we enjoy it as much as some of you do listening to it. So we'll get something in, but obviously we can't wait to get back to the proper stuff. And we're 10 days out of it, and we're ready and raring to go 2 months before the season starts. But Dave, Brad, and Ross, obviously I know you're not here, but thanks very much for joining me throughout the season. Thanks to everyone for listening. And you know what? You can subscribe if you want. I'm going to let you do it this time. I normally say do it if you like, but go on. If you haven't done it, press the wee button, and then there'll not be another podcast for 2 months. You'll forget about it. And then you'll feel good about it when the surprise one comes in early August.
Yeah, I agree. Listen, I've said it because Dave hasn't.
Get in there.
Got to sign off. No, it's been a pleasure again this season, Graham. Again, just a quick mention to other ones out there that it's great to listen to. Yeah, I've just enjoyed the season, listening to everyone's reviews. Some outrageous takes, but we're Sunderland. And I just, yeah, it's just been great. I can't wait. You know what, Graham? It's been that good. I want to start doing review shows of the pre-season friendlies because I just love watching Sunderland again.
Yeah, it's getting to that. And we've been serious for that. It sounds like we're having a laugh, but we're probably being serious. Let's do a review of San Antonio FC away. What do you think of the 11 substitutes at halftime? But yeah, honestly, like I say,
let's hope the floodlights work this time.
Don't even talk to me about that. I think, you're right in what you say. Like, it's been great, everyone tuning in and listening, but we're kind of absolutely blessed. You've touched on a few there, Brad, and obviously you've got your local reports there and that as well, and Wiseman Say, and there's just so many podcasts that Sunderland have, and it's brilliant how many are supported by Sunderland fans. And we like to joke around and take the pee a bit because ultimately, like, that's kind of the way we work. But it is always nice when people listening and think we've got something of value to add. So yeah, continue to do it if you want. If you don't, like I say, it's always fine. But thanks for tuning in this season. If you've left us at this point, I'm going to be questioning why you've left at this point. But if you do, you do. Thanks very much for listening. And how are the lads? Enjoy your summer, everyone.
All the best, mate.
All the best.
listen.